Hi guys, it's Miss Burton. Today let's look at a really cool app called Google Drawings. As long as you have a Google account, you have this. It's free. So if you go up to the apps in the upper right hand corner next to your icon, go to Drive. Once you're in Drive, you're going to click on the plus sign for New in the upper left. And you're going to go down to More. And under More, you're going to go to the second one down that says Google Drawings. At least it's second on my screen. Okay, it's going to open up a new drawing. It's going to be untitled. It'll take a few seconds to finish loading that up. You're going to notice a small toolbar across the top, a rectangle in the middle, and that rectangle has a very faint checkered background. So think of this rectangle with a checkered background as your paper if you're doing a drawing, and the space that shows up on the sides, you can think of that as your desktop. So if you're doing a drawing and you want to bring in resources, I like to bring in some images sometimes to help me with what I'm doing. You can set them anywhere on your desktop. You can put them on your drawing if you want, but once you save your drawing or download it, excuse me, Google automatically saves. But if you want to download it, share it, anything that's on top of your checkerboard background, think of it as being part of your drawing. So I'm going to go to my desktop and I am going to bring in a photograph of some drawing that I've already done. I'm just going to click and drag. You could always go to Insert and Image, okay, and then wherever you want to get it from. So notice that it has placed itself in my drawing area. So I can click on that. I can grab a corner and scale it down and just move it off to the side. Now notice that my drawing is untitled, and to me, I always feel unsafe when my drawing is untitled. If I accidentally close it, I won't know what it is if it says untitled. So I'm just going to call it Cartoon Characters and leave it at that. All right, so the image that I brought in is some facial features, and these are things that if you've seen my other tutorials, you've already gone through this in pencil and perhaps ink. So here I have a basic head shape. I've got a few different ones, but I've got that bean shape that I went over previously. I've got eyes, noses, mouths. Oh, there's some ears over here. That's important. So I'm going to shrink this down again for now. Notice I'm grabbing a corner. You don't want to grab it by the side or the top. So grab a corner to scale it down. Now, within Google Drawings, you have a number of tools. And notice that once I've selected something, I've got some more things. So if I click off, I have fewer tools. The basics here, I've got an undo and redo, and they're showing you the keyboard shortcut Control Z and Control Y. I don't need to print, paint format. Zoom is important. Right now, I can see my entire drawing, and if that fades out or if I zoom in or I zoom out, you can just go back to zoom to fit, and that'll show you the entire thing. You've got your selector tool, and a really important one right here is the line tool, and notice that it has a drop-down menu. So within the drop-down menu, my absolute favorite tool to use in the line menu is the curve tool, so we'll take a look at that in a minute. The others are good too. Okay, the shapes tool is super useful. You've got a bunch of basic shapes. You've got some arrows, callouts. If you're doing a cartoon character and putting them in a comic strip, this is where you have your speech bubbles, your thought bubble, okay, and then some equation symbols, okay, and beyond that, image, etc. All right, so if we want to draw that bean shape that we have drawn in the past, so I just zoomed in, and if I'm looking at that bean shape and I want to think about how do I draw that shape, how do I get that shape? Here I have more of a circle. Well, this bean shape is actually pretty close to an oval. So if I go into the basic shapes menu and I see something that looks like a circle to me, but if I float my mouse over it, it says oval. So if I click and drag, I can get roughly an oval shape that will fit on top of that bean shape, but it's not quite right. So I do find it actually pretty useful to start with an oval if I want to draw a bean. And I mentioned that curve tool, which is one of my favorite tools in Google Drawings. So under the line menu, click on the drop-down arrow, go to curve. Make sure you're not going to curved connector. That's a different tool. So curve. Okay, so I have the little plus line indicator where I'm going to click my mouse. I'm going to click my mouse once starting at the top of this oval, and notice that I just get a straight line that I can swing out to either side. So I thought this was going to be a curve. Watch and learn. All right, so I'm just going to go counterclockwise for some reason. I can go clockwise. And I'm just going to kind of go around and click maybe 8 or 10 times around that circle. And you'll notice that that line does start to curve. You don't want to click too many times, but you also don't want to click too few times. And when I get back to the beginning, you'll notice that there's kind of a little bit of a magnetic pull where the end of the line where I started, or the beginning of the line and the end of the line where I ended up, they kind of want to grab each other. So I have this kind of a lumpy oval that I traced on top of this other oval. I'm going to select it and just backspace delete. So it's imperfect, it has a bump at the top, but here's the really cool thing. So if I select it, I just have a box around it. If I double click it, I have a little purple dot everywhere that I clicked my mouse, and those are movable. So if I move those, move that, and I got rid of that bump in the top. But say I want to bend this in. So I'm going to go to one of my purple dots and I am going to bend that in and notice what happens. Okay, so I can go around every single place where I clicked that mouse and I can edit my shape or make changes to it by clicking and dragging those purple dots. And you can do quite a bit with that. I mean, look at that. That's pretty crazy. It doesn't really give me a bean shape. But I find it a really simple way to make a bean shape is to start with an oval and kind of trace it, do maybe 10 or 12 clicks of the mouse so that you can edit it. And you've got all these different places where you can change it. So I'm going to go back to zoom to fit. And that's a pretty tiny little bean shape that I drew there. So what if I want it bigger? Well, I can grab the corner like I did before with my image, but notice that I can end up really distorting my shape. I can make it really, really wide. I can make it really, really tall and narrow. And maybe I want that, but maybe I just want it bigger. So I'm going to undo. I'm going to Control Z. Remember that was an option here for undo. You can also just go to the arrow. But if I hold down the Shift key, so this becomes a little bit more magic, I'm going to hold down the Shift key with my left hand. I'm right-handed, and I'm going to click and drag any corner. It's got to be a corner. And notice that no matter how I pull out on that, I'm not able to stretch it out. I'm just resizing and I'm making it bigger. Okay, so I've resized my bean. Now I could go to the top and I've got a little circle here and that's a little spinner. I can rotate that. So now I've rotated it about 90 degrees, not quite. It'll actually tell me, 180 degrees. And I can undo that back the number of times. I can also go to the arrange menu since I have it selected and rotate, super useful. I can rotate however I want. I can go back the way I had it. I can flip horizontally so it's facing the other direction. I can also flip vertically. So these are really useful tools that you can use. Again, you can always just click and drag it. And it's back to where I started. You can also grab one side and pull it straight across. And it's trying to tell me how far I've gone. So you can kind of flip it that way. That's another way to do it. So notice that my shape is filled in light blue. If I go to the paint bucket, the fill color, it's this, what they call it, light blue 3 is the default. It automatically fills in that. I also have a black outline. And so that's here. It looks like a little pencil or a crayon and it says border color. So I have a black border and that's, again, the default. So I could choose any of these colors or I could choose a custom color. The border weight is the thickness of that line and the default or the automatic is 1 pixel, px. I can double that. I can go incredibly super thick. Probably not super useful for this. I tend to like 2 pixels myself, but depending on what you're doing, you might like it a little thicker. Now for a human cartoon character, a human being generally is going to have brown skin. All of our skin is colored by a pigment called melanin. You probably know this. It's also what colors our hair and our eyes. In fact, I believe it's the only pigment that we have in our human body. So any version of brown. And I find in the default color palette, the browns tend to be kind of a darker orange or a darker yellow. But if you don't like those options, you can select that and then you can go back and click on custom and you can play around with your selector tool until you find a color that you like better. You can always hold up your hand to your screen and try and get it to match. Or you could go really cartoony and you can think of famous cartoon characters who might have yellow skin. I'm thinking of the Simpsons. I think they come out yellow. You could go with bright yellow. You could do alien green. You could do turquoise. But for me, I tend to like to have some version of brown. Even though it's a cartoon character, I still want it to be a human character. So I'm going to resize. I'm going to hold down that shift again. And here I have this nice bean. Now, the really cool thing about using a program like Google Drawings or a lot of different digital drawing tools is that on the computer, once I've drawn something, I don't ever have to draw that thing ever again if I don't want to. If I say that was really hard, drawing that bean, I can duplicate it. So under Edit, I can do copy paste, which is a kind of an old fashioned way to make a copy and then paste a copy on. Because when you make a copy, the computer is just making a copy on its own internal clipboard and we don't see it until we paste it. But notice that there is a shortcut, this just one step, Control D or duplicate. So if I do that, it makes a perfect copy. And now that one is selected. There's a little blue outline around it and I can do Control D. I can keep repeating that. And now I have a whole bunch of those. So I could actually draw a box with my selector tool around this whole set. I'm actually going to hold shift and I'm going to shrink these down because I don't need them to take up that much space. But I have a whole bunch of extra beans that I could use for whatever purpose I want for later on. So super useful. Make a bean, make some copies. And remember, if I double click, I can adjust this. Okay, and if you want it shorter, you can just squeeze it up like that. And if you don't really like that, again, if you double click, you're going to get those purple dots. So if you want to play with your bean shape, feel free. But you'll notice that if you only gave yourself maybe 5 or 6 or 8 of your mouse clicks when you are drawing your bean, you're not going to be able to change it as much as you might choose to, as much as you might like to. So there's a bean shape. And I want to add some facial features, since this is something that we did before. So I'm reminding myself that a simple eye shape for a cartoon character is an oval. Now we've already drawn an oval that's easy to find under the Shapes menu. And if you select that, if you just click once on the desktop, you're going to get a perfect circle. So an oval is just a stretched out circle. So you can get a perfect circle if you want. But again, if you don't hold shift and you grab any of the little squares on any side, you can end up without a perfect circle. And it's pretty much impossible to get it back without just going to undo. So again, if I want to save that perfect circle but change the size, we call that scaling, I'm going to hold shift and grab a corner. Okay, so if you love that perfect circle, then that's perfectly fine. Okay, I personally prefer a slightly more pinched oval, so I'm just going to kind of play with that. Now, remember, I'm going to double check my border weight. I have 4 pixels, and I like it to be consistent. I like it to have the same thickness of line all throughout my drawing. When I'm doing a cartoon character, that's a preference that I have. Remember, it's defaulting to fill in light blue. So I'm going to go up and actually fill this in white. And the human eye, the white part we call the sclera. So there's the white sclera. Now I am missing the black pupil here. And I can shortcut by just duplicating that shape right there. I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. I'm not going to scale it. I'm not going to hold shift. And I am going to get rid of my border. I'm going to make that border transparent. Now it's solid white. So I'm going to fill it in solid black. So I can adjust this to however I want it. I can put it right in the center. And you may have noticed that Google gave me a little crosshairs, a little red vertical line and horizontal line that's helping me to put that exactly in the center. Now, if what I'm working on is small on my screen and I want to see it bigger, I can grab my zoom tool, my magnifying glass, and I can draw a box around the part that I want to see. So to make this a little bit easier on me, I'm just going to zoom in so that I can see my eye up close. It's tempting to do 2 eyes separately, but I'm going to remind you that one of the really cool things about using a program like Google Drawings is that you can duplicate the drawing that you've already done. So if you put in a bunch of energy and time and effort into drawing a really cool eye, you don't need to do it twice. You could duplicate it and make a few simple changes, and it'll save you a lot of time. So think about, do you want your character looking up? Do you want them looking to the side? Do you want them looking straight in the center? Do you want them looking down? Okay. Now, something I didn't mention is that in an actual human eye, the pupil is a perfect circle, but this is a cartoon character, and no human eye is an oval. So we're going to suspend disbelief here. So go ahead and set up your eye how you want it. Remember from before, we might put in a little shape that is white again, to show a reflection since human eyes are kept wet. That's a really important thing. So I'm going to use this curve tool because it's going to give me what we call an organic shape. An organic shape are shapes found in nature. Think of the word organ. Notice that one has an outline. I'm going to get rid of that outline. And that default light blue actually, I think, looks pretty nice for the catch light. Now I could just go really simple. Now notice if I have something light in value means how light or dark it is. So this is light blue and it's pretty close to the background. If I have no outline on something and say it's white, it's going to be really easy to lose track of it. But if I click and drag a box, it'll find it. So just be warned. I'm just going to undo until I get the light blue. All right. So I'm going to draw a simpler kind of a triangular shape here, but it's going to be a little rounded because it's with the curve tool. So that one I think looks pretty cool too. And if you feel like your little reflection is a little too big, you can just easily kind of move in and play with it. Now I'm going to go ahead and just delete this and get rid of it. If I go back to zoom to fit and I want to grab this eye and move it over here, look what happened. I lost the other pieces. I'm going to undo. And I want to glue these together. So if I go into my file menu, I'm looking for glue. So what I really want is to group this. And notice that group under the arrange menu is what we call grayed out. It's not black. I don't have the option. If I float the mouse over it, I can't do it. Because in order to group, you have to have selected more than one object. Okay, so right now I have this object right here that's this white oval. And I'm going to zoom in just because I want to move it, whoops, a little more delicately than it's letting me when I'm zoomed out really far. Something I didn't mention is you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to move things that you've selected. So in this case, I used the arrow keys. Okay, so if I want to glue these together, like I mentioned, I'm going to take my selector tool and I'm going to click and drag a box around all the objects that I want grouped. Notice that I'm not touching anything else that's in here. I'm not close to that bean that I drew. So if I let go, it might be a little tricky to see, but there's a really thin light blue outline around all of the objects. And you can see this one here. All right, so I have them all selected. So now when I go to arrange, group is black. It has a shortcut. It's 3 keystrokes. I personally am a fan of the 2 keystroke shortcuts. I get a little lazy when it comes to the longer ones. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my mouse for this. So now if I click off of it and I click anywhere on this eyeball that I've drawn, and now I can use my arrow tools or I can use my mouse and click and drag, and it'll take the entire thing. So what if I want that to come back apart? You can just go to arrange and ungroup is another option. 1, 2, that's 4 keystrokes. So I'm just going to do, or 4 keys. Okay, so now it's back apart. Now, if you group a bunch of things in stages, then when you go to ungroup, you're going to have to ungroup it in those same stages. It doesn't take everything apart all at once if you glue them separately. All right, so I mentioned that once I have made one eye, I can just make a duplicate of it. So remember in the edit menu, duplicate is Control D. I like those short ones, and I don't know what that was. Make sure that I have this selected. Let's try that again. And I only got the background, so I must have ungrouped it. Let me try that again. Arrange. I ungrouped it, and then I tried to duplicate it. That's what happens. So duplicate, and I have an exact copy. So if I want these lined up, notice those guidelines that pop up with Google Drawings. I'm going to go back to zoom to fit so I can see everything. Now I want to check and see if I like this style of eyes. So notice that I clicked and dragged a box. I did not group them. I just selected them at the same time. So if I have those selected, I can move those around. I'm using my arrow tools. With the bean bent in on the left, it looks like this head is turned slightly in that direction. So I'm probably going to do best if I set those eyes up not in the center of the head. That'll look a little strange. So I want it to look like the head is turned, so these eyes are this way. Now an option that I have, notice that these are not grouped together. Each individual eye is grouped by itself. Ooh, I could have that one stick out. I could make these slightly different sizes. So I'm going to hold shift and scale this up. And that eye is bigger. And now it's in front. I can rotate it a little, so it's a little bit crooked. So this can feel a little bit silly, a little bit goofy. Maybe this person's making kind of a silly face. Okay, they look like fried eggs with a black yolk, now that I think about it. All right, so if I don't like it, just undo. I'm just going to go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z until I have it back how I liked it. I kind of like that. So I'm going to leave the eyes like that. Now notice I haven't added an eyelash. You can use the curve tool and draw some little eyelashes if you want. I've seen people do straight lines. That's your choice. And let's do a nose. So in my noses, I have some different shapes. And I can use my curve tool and I can think about, let's do a really simple one. I'm going to do a nose with my curve tool where I round it, but I don't close it. So notice in this case, I've got to the end of where I want to be, but if I pull away from there, I haven't closed my shape. See how it wants to snap up and close it. If I want an open shape like this one here, like many of these, then I just need to actually double click and notice that it'll let go. So it did not fill in. It just has an outline. However, notice that there is the fill color bucket. So you have the option in this case to fill it in. So I'm going to fill it in with that shade of brown that I chose for the skin color for this character. So here I have a nose, and remember that I can double click and I can make adjustments. I can make it more rounded. I could bend this part up, but notice that I get this perfectly straight line. Since I didn't close this, it's just going to draw a straight line between the ending parts. So I'm going to go back, zoom to fit. And remember that I can go to arrange, rotate, flip horizontally. And it looks like I have this brown, but I have a thinner line, and I think that looks strange. So I'm going to go up, and I'm going to make sure that these all have the same thickness. So the thing about coloring that in, if I put it down here and it's not shaded in, let's see what happens if I make it transparent. You can see the skin tone through there, but if I want it to go in front of this eye, then I can see the eye through it, and that's awkward. So let's fill it in. So you could put the nose in so that it goes in front of the face, just like that. Okay, pretty simple. Now, some mouths. Let's go with something simple. Notice this is an oval here. So I'm actually just going to do an oval mouth just for the sake of simplicity and time. So again, I can just go into the shapes, go down to the oval, and I can click and drag it to the size and shape that I want. Okay, notice that's perfectly straight up and down. I want that filled in black. So I'm actually going to get rid of the outline, but I want it a little bit crooked, and I'm going to drag it down. This person is looking surprised. So notice that it's the mouth that makes the person look surprised. If I take that mouth off, there's no mouth. They don't look surprised. Okay, so there's that mouth. And if I want to add some eyebrows to make it look like they're really surprised, a really simple thing to do is, again, with that curve, as I mentioned, this is a very favorite shape for me. I'm going to make some eyebrows that are just 3 clicks, and that's super thin, so I'm going to thicken that up. I can go to the 4 pixels that I've been using, or I could go to double that. Okay, and eyebrows that are raised up high make a person look surprised. So watch how easy it is to change that facial expression. So I'm going to bring that down. Now they look surprised but maybe sad. If I shrink this, oh, it's a lot softer of an expression. Or if I go in with my, oh, watch this. I'm just going to duplicate this. Control V, and I'm going to rotate it. So in cartooning, simplicity is super awesome. Okay, I can just play around with that. And now I have a totally different facial expression. So I'm going to undo, just Control Z, get back the one that I had that I liked. Okay, there's a simple facial expression and an ear. Remember, ears should be pretty simple. If I'm doing simple features on my cartoon character, I want to be consistent with that simple ear. So I can just do kind of a C shape or a C shape with a little echoing line to show the idea of the earlobe having a thickness. And I can zoom out if I like it that way. Okay. So I'm just going to go next to the head and draw the ear shape. And I'm going to click as many times as I feel like I need. Again, notice it did not automatically fill since I didn't close the shape. So I'm going to make that 4 pixels. And I'm going to use that same color that I've been using, and it's got that vertical line that's attaching it. But once I click and drag and move it over here, that just blends in with the rest of the eye. So I'm going to do a simple curve. Okay, and there's my ear. So I like to group things that belong together. So this is part of the ear. I'm going to hold Shift and I click on the rest of the ear instead of drawing a box, because that would select the bean shape head behind it. So notice that I've got a light blue outline around both of these objects. So if I go to Arrange, Group, now that ear, come on, there it is. Move it around. Ears are generally lined up with the eye and nose. So if I want it to look more realistic for some strange reason, I could stretch that out. But remember, cartoon characters are all about exaggeration. So I could go tiny. I can make it this funky little Shrek-shaped ear that I put way up higher. But I'm just going to leave it there. And the opposite one, so if I wanted to duplicate this one, I could go to Arrange, Rotate, Flip horizontally. It's the opposite direction. If I put this on the opposite side, it's going to look really strange. Number one, it's in front of the head, and it should be behind the head because the head's turned. So a tricky thing that you can do in the Arrange menu is the order of things. So think of these as stacked up pieces of paper or objects that you have on your tabletop. So I can, it's already in the front, so I can't bring it forward. Whatever the last thing is that you drew or brought in is going to be stacked on top. So I can send it backwards, or I can just send it all the way to the back. So if I send it to the back, it's now behind that line, and I can move it over. But the reality is, with the head turned as far as it is, I'm probably just not going to see that other ear. So I'm going to leave it like that. All right, this video has gone on pretty long. I have demonstrated how to use some of the basic shapes, how to change the order, how to resize, how to fill in, how to adjust line thickness, how to group. I think that you have a lot to play with for now. So I am going to zoom to fit and see that cartoon head. And I'm actually going to just go ahead and draw a box around everything and group everything for now, so that if I want to reshape, resize, scale that head, I can just do Shift. Notice the line thickness stays the same thickness. So the line thickness is going to look extra big compared to the size of that whenever I resize. All right. So if I wanted to do a second character and I want them to look like they're related or they were drawn by the same cartoonist, duplicate. And at this point, unless they're identical twins, I'm going to need to change some things. So I have not, I'm going to rotate. I have not given them hair. I haven't given them eyelashes. I haven't given them bodies. But I could make one a little bit bigger than the other, and maybe I have a parent and child. Okay, and probably have a different facial expression, etc. All right, so I'm going to stop there for now. I hope you enjoyed this, and I encourage you to play around with Google Drawings. I admit that I taught myself Google Drawings, and over the years, they've added some changes and some improvements. But if you just play around with the menu, anytime you do something you don't like, you can just go to the back arrow or to undo, or Control Z, and it'll put it back how you had it. And remember that you can check your history and you can go back to the way you liked it before if you made a mistake. So I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a try. I'd love to see your drawings. All right. Happy art making.